The water had been dripping for 3 days, but on the 4th night, it turned into something else entirely. It wasn't just a leak anymore, it was a flood of everything she had been holding back for years. As the pipe under her sink burst with a violent crack, water gushed across the kitchen floor, soaking her bare feet, creeping into the living room, and threatening to destroy the last fragile pieces of her already broken life. She stood frozen, staring at the chaos, her hands trembling, her heart racing, not because of the water, but because deep down, she knew this moment symbolized something much bigger. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the unexpected ways life brings people together, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the Emotional Stories. And tell us in the comments, have you ever met someone who changed your life when you least expected it? Her name was Elara, and for the past 2 years she had been surviving, not living. After a painful divorce that left her emotionally drained and financially unstable, she had moved into a small, aging apartment on the edge of the city. The place was cheap, but it came with problems. Cracked walls, flickering lights, and now a pipe that had decided to give up just like everything else in her life seemed to. She had tried calling multiple plumbers, but either they were too expensive, too busy, or simply didn't bother to show up. That night, standing in ankle-deep water, she felt the crushing weight of helplessness pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just about fixing a pipe, it was about realizing how alone she truly was. With shaking hands, she made one last call to a local plumbing service she had found online. The voice on the other end was calm, steady, and reassuring. He said he would come immediately. She didn't believe him at first. But then, 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, she found a man standing there, slightly out of breath, holding a worn toolbox in one hand. He looked ordinary at first glance, simple clothes, tired eyes, and a quiet presence. But there was something about him that felt different. Maybe it was the way he didn't hesitate to step inside, rolling up his sleeves without asking unnecessary questions. Or maybe it was the way he glanced at the flooding floor, not with frustration, but with determination. His name was Daniel. He got to work immediately, kneeling in the water as if it didn't bother him at all. His hands moved with practiced precision, tightening, adjusting, replacing parts, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Elara stood nearby, watching him, feeling a strange mix of relief and curiosity. There was a silence between them, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken stories. As he worked, she noticed a small detail that caught her attention. There was a faded photo tucked into his wallet, barely visible when he reached for a tool. It was a picture of a little girl, smiling brightly, her eyes full of innocence. Something about that image made Elara's chest tighten. After what felt like both minutes and hours, the water finally stopped. The chaos was contained. But something else had quietly begun. Daniel stood up, wiping his hands, and for the first time he looked directly at her. His eyes carried a depth that she couldn't quite understand, like someone who had seen pain, endured it, and somehow kept going anyway. Elara thanked him, her voice softer than she expected. She tried to offer him extra money, knowing how urgent the situation had been, but he refused with a simple shake of his head. He only asked for the standard fee, nothing more. It surprised her. In a world where people often took advantage of desperation, his honesty felt almost unreal. Before leaving, he hesitated for a moment, glancing around her apartment, the worn furniture, the dim lighting, the quiet emptiness. It was as if he could see through the surface, understanding more than she had said. Then he gave a small nod and walked out. The door closed behind him. But the silence he left behind felt different now. That night, as Elara lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him, not because he had fixed her sink, but because for the first time in a long while, someone had shown up when she needed it the most. And somehow, that small act of kindness felt like the beginning of something she didn't yet understand.
The next morning, the apartment felt unusually quiet, but not in the same suffocating way it used to. The floors were dry, the kitchen was intact, and yet, something had shifted inside Elara. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was subtle, like the first hint of sunlight after a long, endless storm. She tried to go about her usual routine, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the night before, to the man who had arrived when no one else did, to the quiet strength in his presence, to the way he had refused to take advantage of her vulnerability. Days passed, but the memory stayed. Then, one afternoon, as she stepped out to buy groceries, she saw him again. He was across the street, kneeling beside a small girl who was laughing uncontrollably as he tried to fix her bicycle chain. The same worn toolbox sat beside him, but this time his expression was different, lighter, softer, alive. Elara paused, watching from a distance. The little girl, no older than 7, wrapped her arms around him once he finished, her joy spilling over in the simplest, purest way. And in that moment, Elara understood something she hadn't before. He wasn't just a plumber, he was a father. Something stirred inside her chest, something warm, unfamiliar, and slightly painful. It reminded her of a life she once dreamed of, but never got to have. She didn't realize she was staring until Daniel looked up and noticed her. For a brief second, their eyes met. There was recognition, and then something more. He stood up, guiding the little girl toward the sidewalk before walking over to her. There was a slight awkwardness in his steps, as if he wasn't used to running into people outside of work. Elara felt her heart race, though she didn't understand why. Their conversation was simple, almost ordinary. They spoke about the repaired sink, about the neighborhood, about nothing and everything at the same time. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet connection forming, one that neither of them fully acknowledged. The little girl soon joined them, introducing herself with a bright smile that instantly softened the space between them. Her name was Lily. As Elara spoke to her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Joy. Not the loud, overwhelming kind, but a gentle, steady warmth that settled deep within her. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes it was accidental. Sometimes it wasn't. Daniel would stop by to check if everything was working fine, though it was clear he didn't really need to. Elara would offer tea, and they would sit together in the small kitchen, talking about life in quiet, honest ways. She learned that he had lost his wife years ago, left to raise Lily on his own. It hadn't been easy. There were days when he barely managed to keep things together, days when exhaustion felt like a permanent state. But he never gave up. And somehow, that resilience spoke to something deep inside her. For the first time in a long while, Elara didn't feel alone. But life, as she had learned, rarely allowed things to stay simple for long. Just as she began to let her guard down, just as she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance at happiness, something unexpected happened. Her past came knocking. Her ex-husband. He showed up one evening unannounced, his presence carrying the same weight of control and emotional turmoil she had tried so hard to escape. His words were sharp, manipulative, designed to pull her back into a cycle she had fought to break. And suddenly, all the progress she had made felt fragile, uncertain, at risk of falling apart.
The moment her past reappeared, it was as if the walls she had carefully rebuilt around her heart began to crack again. Her ex-husband didn't come with apologies or regret. He came with control, with the same suffocating energy that had once made her feel invisible. He spoke as if he still had a place in her life, as if the pain he had caused had simply faded with time. But it hadn't. It lingered in the quiet corners of her mind, in the doubts that crept in when she was alone, in the fear that maybe she wasn't strong enough to move forward. That night, after he left, Elara sat on the kitchen floor, the same place where the pipe had burst weeks ago. But this time, there was no water flooding her home, only emotions flooding her heart. She felt torn between who she used to be and who she was trying to become, and for a moment, she almost gave in. Almost. But then there was another knock on the door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there. He hadn't planned to come. He had just been passing by, something telling him to check on her. And when he saw her tear-streaked face, he didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He simply stayed. Sometimes the most powerful kind of support is silent. In that silence, Elara found something she didn't realize she needed. Not solutions, not advice, but presence. A reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Over the following days, she made a choice. A difficult one. A brave one. She refused to let her past define her future. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were moments of doubt, moments when the old fears tried to resurface, but this time she didn't face them alone. Daniel and Lily became a steady part of her life, not as a replacement for what she had lost, but something entirely new, something real. The apartment that once felt cold and empty slowly filled with warmth. Laughter echoed through the rooms. Shared meals turned into cherished routines. And for the first time in years, Elara began to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. But the most beautiful part wasn't just the love that grew between them. It was the way they healed each other. Daniel, who had been carrying the weight of single fatherhood alone, found comfort in having someone to share the journey with. Lily, who had grown up without a mother's presence, found a gentle, caring figure in Elara. And Elara, she found herself again. Not the broken version shaped by pain, but a stronger, kinder, more resilient version who understood that sometimes life doesn't give you what you expect, but it gives you what you need. Months later, on a quiet evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from the small balcony, there was a moment, a simple, unspoken moment, where everything felt right. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just peace. And in that peace, Elara realized something profound. The night her pipe burst wasn't the moment her life fell apart. It was the moment it began to come together. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment that felt like a disaster at first, but later turned out to change your life for the better? And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Emotional Stories. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Because sometimes, the people who walk into our lives for the simplest reasons end up changing everything.